All right. Welcome, everybody. And today I have with me Joanne Fawcett. She's an author. She's on speaker of topics such as UFOs, extraterrestrials, the paranormal, and the military involvement that goes along with that. She also tells me that she's a crone. And we'll find out what that is a little bit later together because I don't know either. Um, sh- as you can hear from her intro, she's a very accomplished woman. However, today we're going to go and have a discussion on her early life where she had a life of abuse and she actually went through 7 failed marriages, but she overcame all of that. And that's what I really want to get into. So, how are you tonight, Joanne?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. So, all of the info I've read online seems to be more about what's happening in your life right now. And I apologize, I wasn't able to read your book, Midlife Magic, but I really like to focus on how you got to where you are now, because it
Okay.
seems like you went through a bunch of different journeys to get you to where you are, and you're a wonderful person.
Thank
And
you.
I really like to find out, how does someone get through all that and come out the other side, because I think the audience will take some numerous lessons away from it, and it'll help a lot of people. And that's really what we're all
Great.
about here.
That
Okay.
that is that is, and hopefully nobody else has to go through that many marriages to be happy.
I'm hopefully not. I think you probably gave Elizabeth Taylor a run for her money.
We've
Um,
actually been married to the same number of men. She just has one more marriage than I do because she
ah,
married Richard Burton twice. But I have a friend here who calls me Jaja, but I can't remember how many times Jaja Gabor was married, but a lot.
yes, 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 she was. So let's go back to the almost to the very beginning. So can you tell
Okay.
me, like, where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Sure. I grew up in Southern California in the suburbs of Los Angeles. I am the third of fourth children, so I have that middle child probably syndrome going on. I have an older sister, an older brother, and a younger sister. For the most part, my mom was a stay at home mom. My dad was working. He was a finance officer in the Army, and he was in the Army when I was born. And then he was in managerial positions using his numbers stuff. And I come from a numbers background. Grandpa's and my sister, we're all accounting, bookkeeping people. So, and it's interesting, I think I had the typical childhood. It's like, except that my dad, well, not, you don't know, my dad was an alcoholic, so that impacted things. And there was a lot of arguing. And um it was interesting. One of the reasons I became a bookkeeper was because I would watch my parents argue every month when it was time to pay the bills. And then after my dad died, I said, Mom, why don't you know how to pay your own bills? I was only allowed to put the check in the envelope. So, part of my journey is like to empower women to, do things that maybe you need to learn how to do for yourself. Even if you're still married, you still need to have an active role in the finances of the family. Yeah, I'm very firm on that belief. But it's like, unfortunately, I learned from my mom how to be codependent, and how to enable the addict or alcoholic in your family and kind of just try to keep the peace. But on the other side, we had a lot of fun camping vacations, and our whole family, we were Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, all that stuff. So we had a lot of wholesome activities going on. And then when I was about 10, I joined the Mormon Church because my best friend's family were Mormons and they started taking me to church. And so I was a Mormon for 30 years until that just didn't work for me anymore. Um, and let's see, went to Brigham Young University right out of high school. I was there for 2 years and then got married for the first time. 5 of my husbands were Mormons, and yeah, no, that was part of the problem.
Interesting.
Because, and I'll just say, it's like, because you're in the same church with somebody does not mean you're gonna have a happy marriage. It's like, if you still, I get a little preachy on this now. It's like, if you don't take the time to really get to know the person, and if you don't take the time to talk about important and important, intense things before you get married, it doesn't matter. Well, might have helped, but just because you go to church together and you look good at church doesn't mean you're going to be the happy little spiritual family when you're not at church. So, you know.
That sounds like that's some great advice, and I think that's one of the things that are going on today with our really horrific divorce rate. Is I think a lot of our marriages, they just don't take that time
Right.
to
I
actually
didn't.
get to know each other.
I
So
didn't.
I have to step back a little bit
Sure.
because I think there's this stigma
Uh-huh.
around the Mormon Church, or I guess what is called the Church of the Jesus
Jesus.
Christ of Latter-day
Jesus.
Saints,
Yeah,
or
it's a very
LDS.
yes.
So can you provide a little bit of authentic background so maybe we can quell some of the stereotypes and stigma that goes around with the Church of Latter-day Saints?
They believe in happy families. They believe that, husband and wife should be helpmeets. So to me, that means equal partner. That just never translated into my marriages. Um, they believe, that you pray together, you go to church together, you do service and all this good stuff. They also believe that the man is the head of the household. Some and take that to mean that, you do whatever I say and I'm in charge and, you're just the woman and,
Mm.
you know,
So we're literally living back in the 50s.
pretty much.
So
And again, it's like even though I did grow up in the 50s and I always wanted the happy family with the white picket fence, I never got it. And I was working pretty much during any of my marriages. Yeah. The only time I didn't have to work is after my daughter was born, and I stayed home with her till she started going to school. And her dad had died, so I had some financial aid from that. I worked as much as the husbands did, and brought in sometimes more money than they did. So, but,
basically, so it is it sounds like a patriarchy, like
it's
as far
definitely
as,
a patriarchal church. Yes.
but not so much that even back then they didn't disallow or didn't look down on you because you decided to work.
No, 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 and there were many women in the church who did work, and especially, I was a single mom off and on many times, so it just kinda was normal. Most of the single moms worked. I never got well, I got a little bit of child support, but I never got, like, alimony or any spousal support anytime I got a divorce, so, I worked or I starved, so I worked.
Yeah. Okay. But see, there's a
And I
stigma.
yeah,
There's the stigma that
true,
I'm talking
true.
about,
Yeah,
is that, a lot of people feel that, in the Mormon church, it's, the woman is in the home and
right.
she's the slave to the dad, and he expects dinner to be on the table when he walks in the door, and the kids have to, they're be seen and not heard and all this. And you've already one little thing you've already quelled, and that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah,
I
I mean, and I
appreciate that.
did want the whole little, stay-at-home mom, have a bunch of babies, have dinner on the table, and I did want that. That's just not the hand that the universe dealt me, so I've had to deal with it. So,
Okay. Well,
yeah,
no, and obviously you dealt with it right, and it
yeah,
sounds like the genes that you've got from your parents, which was numbers, worked in your favor.
they did.
So
It did,
that's
yeah.
fantastic. So you said that you met husband number one
Yes.
in school.
I did. I was going to BYU. He was actually going to Utah State up in Logan, but his friend's band was playing at our school dance, and so he started asking me to dance, and then we started dating. And yeah, see, my mistake was I kept meeting all these people at the church dances,
Oh my God.
except for the two that were not members of the church. I met everybody else at a church dance, I think, or obviously some church related activity. But yeah, we met, we got married. I think we met like right before Christmas break and I went home for school, but like by the following summer, we were married. But again, we didn't see each other all the time. And the only reason really he got wanted to get married was because I think I was like 20 when I got married and he was slightly older, but his family was really pushing him, you're old, you're of the age, you should get married, find a wife. And I happened to be a home economics major at that time. Glad I didn't go into that field, but so yes, I was fair game. And then we get married. And I mean, as we split up, oh, I never loved you. It's like, what? No, I just married you because my family wanted me to get married. It's like, okay, this is not helpful.
Oh,
And,
geez.
and I was thin back then. Not super thin, I'm never super thin, but for a 20-year-old, I was thin and, but I wasn't model thin, and he was a photographer, so he was used to looking at all these cute co-eds and, doing his photography stuff, and, "You need to lose weight, you're blah, 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 blah." It's like, "Oh god." And, it just so the marriage lasted a year, if
Mm,
that. I might have left before we even had our first year anniversary. So most of the marriages didn't last very long, but there's a there's a repeating pattern. Number one, I didn't know most of them very long before we got married, because also in the Mormon Church, and this is not a myth, it's like you're not supposed to have sex before you get married. So everybody's hormones are raging, and you're not, it's you're not supposed to live with them before you get married. So, the logical thing is to get married. And
uh,
what did he do after we got married? Years later, I found out he did marry some cute petite little thing, and they started having babies. Who knows when? He didn't want any babies with me, but they started having babies, and it's like, fine, you've got your petite little thing, and that's great. I'm glad you're happy. See ya.
well, that's huge. I mean, that's big of
Yeah.
you. You know what I mean? For you to sit there and say, "Well, listen, it didn't work out, and I'm you on what you wanted, and I'm happy for you." I mean, how many marriages has you gone through before you found this out?
I had
I'm totally kidding. You don't have
I
to.
had been married the second time by the time I found that out, because I had married my daughter's father, and I had her, and he died when she was a baby. So,
Oh,
yeah, I found all that out when she was, maybe a year old. So it wasn't that long.
oh, okay. So, all right. So we can keep just keeping
Track.
straight. Yeah, this we keep track. If you don't have to use the real names if you don't want to, but what
I don't
just
care.
first name?
Their real names are in my book.
Okay, so the first name of husband number one,
Is Dean Wagstaff.
Dean, and
Yeah,
then husband number two.
David.
Okay. So David, you had your daughter with.
I did. And yeah, it was interesting because he was not a member. He actually, and I was hosting a Mormon singles, activity at my house. And his sister, who was Mormon, thought, well, if we just meet some nice Mormon girls, that'll help him. That'll help him. And so we met and hit it off. And he wanted to get married right away because, and we did. We were married within a month. So I do not recommend that either. But fortunately for timing wise in the church, it's like I got pregnant right away, probably before we got married, and I didn't always follow the rules. I'm really good at not
Okay.
drinking. I didn't follow all the rules, but anyway, so it's the only child I have. I think I got pregnant with somebody else, another husband later, but that it didn't stick. But so she was the only child I have. So that was meant to be.
And
And then when
can I ask how
he
David?
died,
Yeah.
he committed suicide when she was 5 weeks old. Yeah, he had some emotional problems and some mental health issues and addiction issues. So, but his family didn't tell me any of that before we got married. They just thought if he marries a nice Mormon girl, it'll straighten him out. Well, it didn't. We were very happy until we weren't. We would have headed for divorce because I, being married to him kind of forced me to go inactive. All of a sudden he didn't want me paying tithing, and then he'd make me feel guilty for going to church. And I was stopping by the liquor store buying him alcohol. And it's like, I'm a Mormon. I've never been in a liquor store, hardly ever, maybe with my dad when I was a kid, but it's like, this isn't something I do. So I became a really good codependent and enabler, and it was hard. And, he didn't say he joked about suicide, but he talked about it while we were together. And then when I was 7 months pregnant, he was just starting to really spiral downhill, and he kicked me out, which was a good thing because then he was going to get suicidal again, and I could have died.
Mm.
And then while I was, I had her, his parents told him that I had her. He saw her 2 times, and then he committed suicide. So,
Okay. That
yeah,
one
that
that one
was
had to be tough.
traumatic.
That one had to be tough for you. How did you handle now you've got a newborn and
Mm-hmm.
now you just lost your partner? How does someone handle that?
Fortunately, I when he kicked me out, I moved in with my parents. So my family was very close. And my sister lived across the street. Um, my other sister lived in the area, but so my parents were there. My grandma, we all lived in one house. My sister and her family lived across the street. So I had a lot of family support, and I was going to church, so I had church support. Um, and
Great. So,
I don't know, because he had already kicked me out, so it's like I wasn't. I knew we were heading for divorce if he hadn't
right.
have died. So
But I imagine, I mean, you had a daughter with this man. I mean,
Right.
I'm sure that you felt like you were still in love with him, correct?
By the time he died, maybe not so much.
Okay. All right. It just had gotten the mental you feel like
Yeah, it
the
was
mental issues kind of
difficult.
was really starting to get to you.
It was difficult, and, to hear his psychologist or his psychiatrist say that he's suicidal,
Ooh,
and he didn't, he didn't think he had problems, or it's hard to explain because he really didn't think he needed to be in therapy and to be working on these things. So, he didn't see any problem with drinking and then driving his motorcycle, which he got into an accident. He just yeah,
yeah. It didn't
and
have any common sense
no,
once
once
the
you're
some
taking
of the issues
pills or
kind of set in,
smoking
right?
pot, and I remember, grandkids think I'm absolutely silly because it's like back then in the '70s, marijuana was illegal in California, and I remember he had me drive with him to go buy some pot, and I was terrified. I thought, and it's at night. It wasn't super late, but it's at night, and I'm just, "Oh, we're gonna get caught. We're gonna get arrested, and I'm pregnant, and we're gonna get arrested." And it's just like, how it's just, and he's like, he didn't care. And I told my daughter, it's like, "Your dad blew marijuana smoke in my face, and I'm pregnant." I go, You don't do that to me." It's like, I was never a pot smoker anyway, but it's like, don't blow smoke in my face and think it's funny. And, I got, um, one time I told him, it's like, "I hope there's nothing goes wrong with this baby because of all the drugs you've taken." And that kind of put him over the edge. He didn't like that. But it wasn't long after that that he kicked me out. So thankfully, he kicked me out before he
Right.
killed himself. So
We're only on husband number 2 and my
I
heart's
know.
already starting to ache a little bit. So,
Oh, wait till number
but
3. You'll be
but it's
crying with
not
me.
yeah, but it sounds like you've already mentioned a good thing that we'll have a takeaway in the end is that, getting over something like this, it sounds like a good support system is
Yes, it is.
really
It is.
a very big thing to have when you're
Yeah.
going through stuff like this.
Yeah, and the one thing, I've learned later in life, therapy is really good, so don't think there's a stigma about having a therapist. I didn't have one back then, got one later on, and I still have one now, but, therapy is really good.
Yeah, I've had my issues with therapy myself, and that I understand is pretty much it's really finding a connection between
Exactly.
the and you can't be afraid to sit there and go, "Hey, you know what? Great conversation. Don't feel it. I'm going to find somebody else." And
Right.
people need to have that feeling there where I know I know from from experience that you kind of feel you get into somebody, you've paid them a couple bucks for their time, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're not really jiving, but you feel like, all right, well, I got to give it another try. Got to give it another try. Now you've got several hundred or $1,000 into it, and you're like, well, I'm not going to give up now.
Kinda like my
Um,
husband's.
yeah. So
Sorry, there's a lot
I,
of put a lot of humor into this stuff because what else am I gonna do?
I think that's wonderful. I think that you've gotten to that mindset to where you could, all right, you know what, this has happened to me. It's in the past. We're just going to move on from there.
Yeah, there's a
Speak.
comedy routine that keeps circling in my head, but I haven't gone there yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just we're gonna have to come up with that because that'll
Yeah.
be a nice little comic relief. Let's move on to husband number 3.
Okay, his name was Benny Joe, but we just called him Ben. And I think he was originally from the South. I think he was born in Missouri. Um, Sorry, this was the hardest one. He
Oh,
was a big guy, and he was, active in the Mormon Church. And we met when my daughter was a toddler. She was like 1. She was 1, more than 1, but not quite 2. And, I remember I started to date people, and then all of a sudden, nobody was asking me out, and then this guy, I was thinking of moving to Utah to, because why not? I'm a Mormon, I'll meet a good man there, and I'll go back to school. That was my goal, I'll go back to school. And, then we started dating, and nobody else was asking me out, and then we just kept dating. And the hormones are raging, and he's this really nice guy, and he's strict with my daughter, but he's also acting like he's this really loving dad. And he just believes in being really strict. And it's like, yeah, I wasn't quite sure how I liked that because it's my toddler, and
mhm.
leave her the heck alone. Um, but we got married, and we eloped to Las Vegas. And again, we should not have, because number one, well, eloping's not so bad, but on the way to dropping my daughter off at my mom's, we had a car accident. Somebody's lumber flew out of the back of their car and into the windshield. And, my daughter got a cut on the head. So we went to the hospital first, and then we went to Las Vegas. Here, mom, here's my, stitched up kid. And my daughter's forgiven me many times over for all this shit. Excuse my language.
No, no, no,
Um,
please.
so, we got married, we eloped, we got married, and then we moved into my apartment. And he was we lived in California for a few more years before we moved to Ohio, where some of his family was. But he was very strict, and he was very possessive. And I wasn't working because I had these, benefits from her dad having died. It's like every time I got married, my benefits would stop, but she's got hers. So that helped us live because he never made very much money. Um, but I remember it's like, and my parents just lived across town or a couple towns over. And it's like, if I was to the house during the day and he didn't know where I was, he'd start calling around to look for me. I might have been out doing church work. I might have been at the grocery store. I might have just been across town visiting my mom because I didn't have to work. And, I could drive my little car over there and visit my parents and come home and be home. I was always home when he came home for dinner, but he would go around. It's like, dude, knock it off. And thought, no, she had to stop drinking a bottle. He decided when she needed to go from a crib to a bed. And I just didn't know how to say no. And that was my first big mistake. And he thought nothing of spanking her through. And back then we were using cloth diapers. So, lots of layers and very, but she's, heavily padded. She can't feel that. I go, you're hitting child. She can tell that this is not a good thing. But he thought he needed to be super strict. And it's like, this was a cause of friction right from the very beginning. And before we moved to Ohio, we had bought a mobile home in a not great neighborhood in Southern California. But I remember he came home from work because by then I think anyway, he worked, like long shifts for the mortuary and stuff. So he'd put in a lot of hours and he'd come home. And then I must have said something that pissed him off. And he proceeded to break all the windows in our mobile home. It's like,
Oh,
excuse me? and and so I took the kid and went down to the neighbors. And then, we finally kind of smoothed it over. But I remember going to the church and saying, hey, my husband just broke all the windows. And well, did he hit you? I go, no. Do you think he will? I go, I have no idea. But I still decided to go ahead and move with him to Ohio. He had moved ahead of me to get things started. And, I should have just stayed behind. And he'd gotten mad at my parents for something, planning a birthday family the day he couldn't come because he was sure that they did that deliberately. And then he banned me from talking to my parents or seeing them. It's like, okay, this just doesn't happen in my family. We don't do that. And so as soon as he moved to Ohio, I was seeing my family. And of course, that was a big fight when I got to Ohio. But not long after I got there, he started hitting us. And he hit her more than he hit me. And again, she's a toddler. And I was flabbergasted when he hit me for the first time. It's like, what just happened? And you don't expect it. And I'm saying, and he's like, no, he never beat me to a pulp. No, I never really had to go to the hospital, but I did go to the doctor at least once. But no, and I never called the cops, and I never told the church leaders that we were being hit. And I remember I'd gone out, this is the worst story, but I'd gone out to do some church service with one of the ladies, and I left her home with him because by then he was probably like an ambulance driver, or he was an ENT, or who knows what job he had at the time. He kept changing. But I came home and my little toddler is laying on the couch in her little pink satiny quilted robe with a giant bruise on her face. I know. And I should have called the cops. I did not. And what is a 2-year, she's like 2. And it's like she couldn't, yeah, she's very precocious, and she's very precocious. She was. It's like, but what could a 2-year-old do to piss somebody off so much that he's got to hit her? I mean, this guy was huge. He was feeling big, and it's like, oh my gosh. And I right around the same time, then he hit me, and I almost broke his thumb when he went to try and hit me again. And it's like, yeah, this isn't happening anymore. And I don't. that he hit us as much after that, but the marriage continued way longer than it should have. And once, I mean, finally, I think we were together like 3 years, and finally, I'd had enough. He was off on his 2-day shift with the ambulance company, and we'd had blizzards. And while he was gone, I had one of the church ladies have me pack up enough so I could like ship it off. I'd called my mom, said, I gotta leave. And she and my grandma pooled the money together, got me an airplane ticket. And he came home from work and I said, we're leaving. You're driving us to the airport tomorrow. And that's it. End of discussion. And thankfully the blizzards had stopped enough so that we could drive from where we lived over to Cleveland. And, then I, moved in with the family until the next guy. But yeah, I mean, that was, that's another lesson. It's like, if there's violence, call the cops, because your church leaders aren't going to do anything anyway. It's like, what can they do? But you have to call the cops. If you're in danger, I don't care how much he apologizes. I don't care how, it doesn't matter. You have to call the cops and get them taken care of. Well, get them arrested.
Right.
Sorry,
So,
I don't want to say
no,
what's going through my mind.
no, it's fine. So so that's basically, that's a great freaking rule. But at that time I'm thinking this is maybe what, 1979, 1980?
Yeah, right in there.
You said blizzard. That's what it was,
Yeah,
1979.
yeah.
So, at that time, and I was a little young at that point. So at that time, were you in that time in our history?
Yeah.
It was not readily available. I mean, women couldn't just go to the cops and say, my husband did this to me, and have them be believed.
Yeah, I
It's
can imagine. I know anybody who'd had that problem, and it certainly wasn't talked about at church.
right.
You never heard of anybody having domestic violence in their homes. Yeah,
So whereas today it's pretty prevalent, and
yeah,
there are programs beyond programs about
yeah,
how to get out of an abusive relationship like that.
yeah.
And you were stuck in it, and wow, that's but you
That
out of
that
it,
yeah,
and
and that
you
goes beyond the man being the head of the house, and you do what the man says. That just yeah, no.
I agree. No, and even if I can go back in time and
Yeah,
think about that, it's still like that's just over the top.
yeah,
But you were enough to sit there and finally at the last straw and say, nope, I'm out. And again, support system that was
yeah.
able to help you and get you out of that, and bring you back home to where you
Yeah,
felt safe.
that was good because her dad, we always stayed close with them throughout her whole they're passed now, but they always thought of me as their daughter-in-law, no matter how many people I married. And they always treated her, they just loved her to pieces. And we were always a close part of their family. And that was really nice because, she's close with her aunts. Well, she's got one living aunt now, but on that side of the family. So she's still close with that side of the family. But, great memories with, growing up and visiting her
Right.
grandparents and stuff. And so that's really good. It's like, I wasn't going to cut her off. There was no need to cut her off from them. That was,
Yeah.
it's not her
Um.
fault that her dad died.
So before we go any further, can
Yeah.
we put a name to your daughter? Just the first
Oh,
name,
Melissa.
Melissa. Okay, great. Just so we can call her Melissa. We don't have to keep calling her the daughter. And hopefully that she was young enough that she doesn't remember that.
She remembers everything. She
Oh
remembers
wow.
she remembers all the hitting. She remembers one time, I think when she was 4, she wet her bed during her nap. He made her go outside to the tree and get a switch so he could spank her. Yeah. She remembers all that. And
Wow.
she's in her mid 40s, so she remembers it all. She's forgiven me and we're best friends now, but she remembers it all. Yeah. It's
That's
horrible.
just the fact that she remembers it. That's just, yeah. I was
Yeah.
hoping that you were going to say no, she was 2, blah blah blah. It's gone,
No, she
but no,
remembers
she
it
remembers
all.
everything. Oh,
Yeah.
geez,
Yeah.
that's crazy. So you moved back to your parents,
I
and
did.
Melissa's with you, which is
Yep.
great, and she's out of danger.
Yep.
And how did we meet husband number 4?
A church.
Okay,
Another church
great.
singles dance. Yeah. And he was, again, these guys are so charming on the dance floor and they're charming at church. They've got this public face and the not so public face. And we dated, but again, we're not talking about the important stuff. It's like, people, you need to sit down and talk about your finances and about your parenting and this and that and this and that. And, I just assumed that all these men would want to start having babies. Well, apparently he didn't want to have one with me either. And so it really bothered him that I was kind of pushing him. Well, let's try for a kid. That was just one thing. And again, our marriage didn't last very long, and he just turned out to be a jerk. And he was, again, abusive, but he wasn't as affectionate as I would have liked. And he just didn't seem interested in that much. And it's like, I remember, again, this certain male mindset. It's like, well, he was going to school, or he was, training. And so he wasn't well employed, but he got a job like for a company that delivered ice cream and milk, really good ice cream and milk, and, around the area and stuff. And, well, I have a real job because I'm working, it's physical labor. You don't have a real job because you're just a bookkeeper. It's like, excuse me? I'm using my brain every day and I'm making more money than you, but I don't add up. But right. It's like, I'm making at least or more money than you are. And I work full time. And thankfully, I never had to pay for childcare because, we lived on a family complex. My mom had bought this big property in Northern California. So we all lived there, so she could play with the grandmas and the cousins. So she loved part of her growing up. But in one time, she again, very precocious child. So for some reason, she kicked him, and she was 7. Come on, how hard could that be? I mean, how hard? She didn't hurt him, right. And he wore cowboy boots, and he kicked her, and she still has a dent in her leg to this day from that kick. Yeah. And the other thing, he didn't really hit me, but what did he do? Like, I was trying to be affectionate, so I don't know what body part I grabbed. Nothing totally. Yes, like right. I might have just grabbed his butt or something. I don't know, but and he totally, it's like, really got mad, and like, anyway, he wasn't. It's like, if it wasn't his idea, forget it. Yeah. So it's like,
this was ask number 4. I mean, I'm a husband number
yes.
4.
Yes, that word is right.
Right.
Yeah.
And is the first name, just so we can.
Oh, his first name, Jack.
This really didn't last all that long. You still had to search for that. I saw that.
Well, see, in the book, we came up with, their names are in the book, but we came up with some really fun, sarcastic titles for each husband. And his chapter is called Hit the Road, Jack. So.
Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. Hey, just so you know, that book is called Midlife Magic, right?
Yes. And it's by my last married name. So it's by Joanne Richards. So
Joanne Richards.
Yeah, it is on Amazon.
And it's on Amazon.
It's on everything, but yeah.
And in the show notes, I'm going to have a link on the Amazon, and then also to the publisher, because is it a publisher, or is it actually self-published?
I self-published it, but I have a publishing company, because you're supposed to come up with an imprint. So it's called dragonhillbooks.net. Right. But yeah, so you can get it that way or through all the online things. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to link to that back. But now let's get back, because we have to talk about husband number 5.
Oh yeah, this is the Brigham Young wannabe. So husband number 5, he was a member, and he'd been married a couple times before, and he had 3 kids. And I met him when my daughter Melissa was she was more than 8, so she could have been she was 8 or 9. I don't know if she was 9, but. Yeah, she could have. Well, anyway, 8 or 9. Let's pick. Stick in there. So she was like in 4th grade, and he and I met at this like single adults camp out. You brought your kids if you wanted. So she and I. That's about the only time she and I ever camped together. I grew up camping and never took her camping except that one time. She was not happy, but. He and I met, and we're having this conversation with other people, and he mentioned something about polygamy, and I said, "Well, I'm not against the concept, but thinking like, see, in the Mormon Church, even though it's not legal to do that now, but they tell you like after you die, if you're really good and you go to this one level of heaven, the husbands could have more than one wives over on the other side there. It's like, okay, whatever. It's like, I can live with that, I never what would come out of his mouth, but he wanted to practice polygamy in real life. I know he never succeeded. Trust me. Because he could hardly stay employed. His name is Richard. He had a lot of financial issues, and I was working And I probably was only working part-time then, but I had a really successful Avon business, and I was doing bookkeeping part-time. What?
My mom had Avon,
Well, I was
and
good.
it was so that you say that. So, and just this is a total
There
tangent,
was
but
probably
I
Avon stuff all over the house, right?
there
Yeah.
was, and it was completely. And you know what is so interesting is that so I was in Mississippi playing golf one year, and I didn't know anything about this, but I'm like, my God, the bugs out here are just absolutely
Oh,
crazy.
skin
And
so
everybody
soft.
tells me, yes, they were like, oh yeah, no, come on, summer, we go buy Avon Skin So Soft by the case. We slather that stuff on, they won't touch you for years,
I
partner.
know. I
It's yeah,
That
it
was
was.
the sad part of me not leaving Avon because I ran out of skin so soft.
But the other was is so I my day is I am a business process reengineering manager at a spinal center, and we just got a brand new doorbell, and it's that doorbell that they had in the commercials where
For
it
ding
goes
dong.
ding dong, Avon calling.
Okay.
So yeah, it just kind of brought it up. I'm sorry,
No, it's
but
okay.
yeah,
It's okay. We have fond memories of Mom's Avon business, and I did it when I, really worked it. So, but anyway, Richard Guy, he really wanted to practice polygamy. So, and so we actually never got married. It was a common law marriage, and we told people we got married because on the one hand we're still going to the Mormon Church, so you can't tell them you're living in
right,
sin, and on the other hand we're exploring like New Age religions and things like that. So we're dabbling in other things, and he was out trying to meet other women, and every now and then he'd go on dates, and once or twice he'd bring them to the house, and I was just the roommate. And yeah, it was crazy. He was just never successful at that whole thing working out
yeah,
because you have to have enough money to support people, and it just and then you've got some women. It's like, and you don't, if you're going to try polygamy, don't try to date Mormon women because they're going to tell. So I
right.
think somebody told on him, but eventually, I don't know. He's been married almost as many times as I have, apparently, because I touch with a couple of his kids. So
Oh
um,
yeah, because he had 3 kids, so they
he
moved in
did,
with you, so you
and
started to have a bond with them.
I did, because we were together like 5 years until things were just going really bad, and we decided, okay, now we're divorced. But so it was an easy divorce. But his kind of abuse was because he wasn't good with finances, even though he thought he was. Um, he talked me into investing some money I was managing for somebody who had said, don't invest it in this, and that's exactly what he wanted to invest it in. So I said, okay. And of course, I'm trying to support him, and he lost it all, and then I had to pay that person back. So it's like, so now we broke up, and now I'm in debt up the yin yang, and now I'm not committing. Now I'm filing for bankruptcy. And as soon as we split up, he met somebody else and started having kids. Now he and I got pregnant once, and then I lost it. So it's like, again, my Melissa, the only child I've ever had, obviously I'm not having any more, but he went right on to start having more. So he had at least 3 with her. Yeah. And named
Oh
their
my god.
boy what I was going to name our boy if we'd had one. And then I went to bankruptcy court because he was the reason I'd filed bankruptcy. Here they all traipse in, him and all the babies, the wife and the babies. It's like, really? I'm
Wow.
humiliated beyond belief, and you bring all the wife and all the babies. So that was, yeah. So we've had physical abuse, we've had financial abuse, you've got some emotional abuse going with the ones who just dig at you. So yeah, and the
Jeez.
poor guy who died. But so yeah, that was number 5. So that was
Oh,
that was a pretty long marriage compared to the others. So
yeah. So how did you meet husband number 6?
a church dance. I think
You're
I met
digging
him.
these church dances.
I love to dance, it's one of the only activities that they have for the adult church singles. And I think I met him first at like a conference for the adult church singles, and then I met him at a dance, and he was a good dancer, and we hit it off, and then we got married. And I think the only reason why I really married him, because my daughter was a junior in high school by then, and she was going to go off and be a foreign exchange student. And I didn't internalize it at the moment, but it's like, I didn't want to be alone. Now, that would have been the best thing for me, to just stay in my apartment, work, and support her while she was in Japan. I didn't do that. I got married before she left for Japan, but I didn't move in with him till after she left. We would trade off weekends at each other's houses, and she went to Japan, and then she came back, and he and I were kind of rocky, and we separated for a while, and then he wooed me back into thinking everything was fine, and I was, but I mean, we were both working, so the money was okay. It just, he was boring.
Okay.
It was boring, and it's like I really realized I'm married because of my daughter.
Yeah.
And he was like 13 years older than me, and he had a stepson that I didn't get along with, and so two stories with him. It's like I was turning 40 when I married him, and he said, "Well, where do you want to go for dinner?" And I said, "This place." And so I get home from work, and they go, "Okay, let's dinner," and we go to that place. It's like, but I wanted to go here. It's my birthday. Well, we wanted to go here. He and his son. It's like, well, this is screwy.
Yeah.
This is screwy. I mean, I liked the restaurant, but it's not where I wanted to go. So I had three
Right.
girlfriends from where I used to live, and they each took me out for 3 more birthday dinners at the places I like to go.
And that brings us back to number one, a good support system. And that can
Exactly.
help you while you're well. Hey, this is great.
Yeah. And, I started therapy while I was married to him. And then finally I said, we have problems, and will you come to therapy with me? No, it's all your fault. It's like, excuse me. So he refused to go to therapy with me. And I'm, well, okay, then I'm out of here. I'm out of here for good now. And, I had a friend come help me pick up all my crap, and we, put it in storage. I moved in with her again, another supportive friend. And, yeah, then, but it took, and I don't think we're going to try to get back together, but we just kind of didn't hurry the divorce along. And I think it took almost another year and a half before we really got busy and did the divorce. But again, I'm the one getting all the paperwork filled out. But yeah,
Oh,
so
you're
it
the book.
just, yeah, I know.
You're
And
the,
it
you're the
was,
bookkeeper. You're
yeah,
you're you're the one that's got to die for details. So
yeah. And it's not like, we weren't going to, there was alimony going to be paid because we were both working. We were both, had our own kids to support. He had a house that, I didn't ever want to live at again because it was in a crappy neighborhood. And it's like, I there was no for me to claim his house. We hadn't even been married that long. So it's like, it was a clean break. It just took a while before we got around to doing the paperwork. And it's not like either one of us, was I dating? Did I start dating somebody? I might have dated somebody before the divorce was final, but I don't know. Oh, I forget. I forget that there was this big gap. But anyway, we got a divorce, and that was fine. And then I did start dating again, and yeah.
yeah, and then we get to
Are we get
husband number seven,
7? Who's Mark? And
and
before,
Mark is the military intelligence officer.
yes, and we were together like 25 years. So
Oh wow.
yeah, that's the one. Our divorce is almost. I mean, it was final almost a year ago. And it was interesting because I was dating, this is funny. It's like I was dating this other guy who wasn't a member, but like I think he had his brother that was a member, and his brother had talked him into going to a church dance. So that's how we met. Again, another dance. But he was a really good dancer. So we were getting along, we were dating and stuff. But then I also met Mark, and my roommate, whose husband is in prison, introduced me to him. And it's like, oh, this guy's really smart. He's really charming. We're having a lot of fun talking. And I think even before I actually met him in person, I told this free guy, "Oh, I've met this other guy I like better." And he was mad at me. So that was a big mistake, but it's the path I chose. And so, yeah, number
Well,
one, being
yeah,
married to
I don't.
somebody in prison is a whole unique experience.
So yeah, and we're definitely going to delve into that.
Yeah.
But you just said it was a mistake, but you were with Mark for 25 years. It doesn't sound like it was too much of a mistake.
Well, if I'd had hindsight, I would have stuck with the free guy.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let's delve that a little bit then, because I mean, Mark wasn't. I mean, he didn't go to prison right away. You were together a long, long time, right?
He was in prison when we met. Yeah.
How did that happen?
Again, my the me move out of husband's number 6's house. Her husband was in prison for something he did do, and I visited him a couple times. So I was at the prison setting, and then I was visiting this cute young guy who was in prison who was fun, and we visited a lot. But and then she came home one day and said, "Oh, I met this really nice guy. He's really smart. He's your age. He was visiting with his mom today." And I said, "Oh, smart. That'd be kind of a different boyfriend for me. I'll meet him." But it took a couple months for me to get approved to visit, and so we wrote a lot. So here's getting to know each other through letters. And this guy's really smart. He grew up in a military family. He's lived in many places around the world, and had all these great stories. And then we got to meet in person, and then yeah, and it was really interesting because I was at a Thanksgiving weekend with my family, and usually I would stay the whole 4 days. And it's like, I'm sorry, I have to cut the weekend short because I have a first date with this guy and he's in prison. And they just about lost it because they knew I was dating this new guy who was smart and rich and all this stuff. And so everybody thought I had this great catch, you know, that I'd lined up
Yeah.
this great catch finally because I just wasn't telling people that he was in prison. And so then it came out, so then they were very sad, but, they got over it, even though they wanted me to leave him a lot sooner than I ever did. So,
So what makes someone get married to someone that's in prison?
that's a good question, partly because we got along for the most part. We had a lot of intellectual compatibility, and he had a lot of great stories, so we were just talking all the time, and I'd never been used to having long conversations with anybody I was married to. And we were both in our 40s, or early by the time we met. So it's like, and I was already heading to menopause. So it's like there was not going to be any more kids. I thought maybe if we hurry up and get married, and if he could have a family visit, maybe there'd be, or, if he'd been out, we might have tried for a kid. But okay, there were no kids really. We didn't expect to have kids. And I just didn't realize how I think far enough advanced, like, what is life really like if the guy's never gonna be home? Because he has a life without parole sentence. But at the time I met him, he thought, "Oh, I have a lawyer working on this, and I should be out in a couple of years." It's like, "Oh, I can do 2 years of this. This is, I'll see you every weekend." And I saw him several times a week because my office was really close to the prison where he was at when I met him. I thought, "Oh, 2 years, okay, I can years." Well, 2 years turned into 25. And his lawyer at that time frauded him, wasn't really working on his, appellate work. And so he lost thousands of dollars, and nothing ever happened. So it's been a long uphill battle trying to find new remedies. And now I'll be 70. So he's already 70. He's been in prison almost 40 years. I still firmly believe, I mean, I don't want to be married to the guy, but I still firmly believe he didn't do what they said he did. So I'm
Mm,
okay with saying that. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
he is very smart. Just turns out there's a lot of things he was not very honest about. And yeah, and it turns out
Okay.
he's a narcissist. So book number 2 is all about him.
Oh my God. So,
Oh, I shouldn't laugh.
maybe you could let's put it at a 30,000 foot level of what they accused him of doing.
Oh, sure. They accused him of masterminding a murder of somebody there in Northern California, and the murder happened. But the kids at the time, one of his cover businesses for the military intelligence work was, he's like a not a full contractor, but like they would do remodeling jobs and stuff. So anyway, one of the jobs he was doing was one of his friends. He would use like juvenile delinquents, but do the grunt work. It's today's equivalent almost of, you go hire day laborers,
Right.
okay. And so they said he masterminded this big to kill the guy. They would, and it was 1982. There'd been floods in that area. Um, and so everybody's cash flow was really bad. And so they told the cops, well, he, masterminded this murder because the guy owes him money, and we're gonna come and then sell off the antique cars that he sold or was working on, and sell his automotive tools and all this stuff. And so there was a dead body. The dead body floated up. Everybody got arrested. So he was convicted of first degree murder, even though, and they said he helped them dump the body, but he didn't do any of that. And but it's all circumstantial evidence. And one of the kids got full immunity, and he changed his story several times. The other kid, or he's not a kid now, he is my age, or yeah, whatever. He's in
Mhm.
his 60s, and he's still in prison too. He got 25 to life, but his parole keeps getting denied. So
Wow. That's
yeah.
just insane. insane.
I know. Other
Um,
countries, you might have committed first-degree murder, but you're not in prison that long. So,
that is just crazy, crazy.
yeah.
So, I mean, we go from abusive to being neglected, to wanting polygamy and just wanting just pretty much that's what they want to, to okay, and then what I love about what you've been saying is that you've been completely honest about it as well. Is that hey, one of these was you just didn't want to be alone, um, and to a guy that you met in prison that had basically stated that he was going to be getting out of there soon and never did, and you ended up with him for 25 years. So you've got a lot of loyalty as
I
well.
do, and my daughter, bless her heart, she goes, "You believe." I believe very strongly in the concept of love, and I'm still hoping that someday I'll find the one. Um, do I ever need to get married again? No, but I do. People can find a loving companion. There just needs to be a lot. You need to tread lightly and investigate things more before you jump. You know,
Yeah, so I definitely think that, what you've said today and how you've gotten through this and just the light that you've got. I mean, that I could see,
thank
your
you.
smile and your eyes are bright and the whole bit. And to get through this, because I know plenty of people that might have one of these situations and they pretty much gave up on life. Not necessarily did they
Right,
end up committing suicide, which you had to go through that as well. Crazy.
chocolate
Um,
helps.
yeah, I imagine, but it's just that you don't see that. You don't see that there's a strength there that you've gotten. So that's my next
Yeah.
question is that I know that you're also, and we talked about, and we're gonna dig into that right now as of basically the crone, what that means, what it is, but where in this span of time did you start delving into the paranormal, UFO,
Um,
magical?
the paranormal, I had that gift when I was married to husband number 3, because and I discovered it because he was a funeral director for a while, and there was one time as he transported a body from Los Angeles up to Northern California, and I'm standing there while he's doing this graveside service for this old lady who passed and her elderly relatives, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, she's right there. She's just standing right next to me, just observing what's going on." It's like, "Oh, hello." And it's not like I could see her, I can just feel it. Sometimes if I'm places I can see a shadow, and if I'm taking black and white photos, you can see, the energy. Um, and then fast forward a year or 2 when we were living in Ohio, his sister's mother-in-law passed, and I was singing at the funeral, so I'm overlooking the audience, but I could tell that her spirit was like up in that corner and she's just hanging out watching her service. And so that was pretty cool. And I kind of forgot it after that. And then it was when I met Mark, and he didn't tell me about all the UFO stuff right away. It was more like, and I was doing a newspaper at the time. He got me to start this publishing company, and it's like, well, okay, go check out this aircraft carrier because it's got some interesting military history. It's like, okay. And then now there's this psychic going to be talking about all the ghosts on that aircraft carrier. Maybe you want to go hear her speak. And it's like, oh yeah, this is cool. And so I hooked up with psychic, and then she was a docent at the ship, and it's in it's out well, what used to be Alameda Naval Air Station in Alameda, California. It's called the USS Hornet, and it's famous. It's famous, but it's famous for its military history and also for the ghosts on it, because there's a lot of sailors who died on that ship and also sailors who just want to come hang out because it's a cool place. So I've been there several times, but I've been there with 2 different psychics. But the first time, it's like, you're walking along the hallway, and we were there after most of the visitors had gone. So it's like, oh, the wall's kind of cold and wet. And then we walked in where the anchors are, so the forecastle, and we walked up this ladder stairway thingy. She's going into where the bunks were, and I'm up at the top of the ladder, and it's like somebody's peeking out at me from around this column. It's like, oh, hello. And it was like the shadow. I can't see what it looked like when they were alive, but I can see their shadows. I was like, oh, hello. I'm friendly. I'm just saying hi, but I'm going to go this way. And that was cool. And to me, it's not ever been scary. But it's really cool to know that spirit, because sometimes they hang out because they like the place, sometimes they need help crossing over, and I've only helped cross over one person, who's a brother-in-law, but, there were other spirits on that ship I've encountered, and couple of the 2 times I've been there with different psychics, my father-in-law, because he had some military events on that ship, he's always with me on the flight deck because he was an Air Force pilot, and then, when he died, he was a major, but, um, he's always right by me on the flight deck, and I can feel him, and the psychics that were with me on 2 different times, they could see him, and that was so cool because he died before I ever met Mark, and, but he and I are great friends. You know,
Wow.
I talk to him regularly through a channeling person, and we have great conversations, and I feel like we're friends. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And there have been other places. I've been to historical places with usually with different psychics, but my psychic friend in England, we would go to different historical places, and not that we were looking for the ghosts, but they were always there. And she can see them as they were when they were alive. I can just feel the energy and, like I said, see shadows and stuff. But it's really cool to experience and just, feel. I don't know. I love it. We've also been in a couple places, like we were in a castle one time where the level we were on was like the dungeon level. There were some not friendly spirits there. And she goes, "We got to go." I go, "Yeah, let's go." And, so sometimes you can feel that. And yeah, it's lovely. I love it. And I've talked through the channeling person, I've talked to different people, and through my psychic friend in England, I've talked to different people. And, usually when I was giving talks, my father-in-law would stand. Oh, he was always there. If it was like a private home, he would be there. If it was like at a conference, he was always behind my left shoulder. And I know he was there. And usually there was like this whole array of beings, behind me. And um, because I used to give a lot of talks about different aliens and stuff. So there's always I have a spirit guide that's a reptilian one time species, and she's always like right here. And especially in this one talk I gave, and she's just right there. I was like, that's really hot. And and there were psychics who came up to me and said, "Do you know who was all behind you?" I go, "Yeah." And it's like, okay, now I don't necessarily believe story, but I believe that, these things are with you and protect you. And, you know, it's cool. That's another support system I have, the spirit realm, a big important part for me.
I was just about to say that. I'm like, okay, so you've got a living support system,
I
and then
do.
you've got one on the paranormal side across the veil.
Yes.
If we want to use Hollywood terms.
Yeah.
So those are my two last questions for
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Is one is where does now that you I've been experienced now with this since husband number three, um, where does Hollywood get it right?
That's a good question. I just believe the spirits are right here. There's no
Mm,
other side, and again, I've learned,
okay,
I've, I mean, there's no other special place. I mean, the spirit world is right here. You just have
okay.
to tap into it. And the concept of heaven and whatever, I mean, it's so different than what I learned at church. You know, it's so different. It's like I no longer believe in the Christian God.
Okay.
And it's so funny because we've learned, Jesus is just having a great time and he's fishing, and he's a great teacher. And so, but again, when I met Mark and we started talking about other spiritual things, I left the Mormon Church after 30 years and I said, I don't need this anymore. And I, discovered a new path and new things to just learn about. And yeah, so through the channeling person, we've talked to different kinds of great teachers and masters from long ago. So yeah.
So that's absolutely I am to what you just said. I just need to step back to my question real quick.
Okay,
I'm not
sorry.
sure if maybe you might not be someone that watches movies or TVs or something like that.
I
So
do.
my biggest thing that I go back to is because it uses a bunch of the slash rhetoric from a lot of the other movies is the program that was called Supernatural. It was on for
Oh, I
like
remember that.
11
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
and was a fantastic show all of it. But okay, salt about keeping,
Oh,
blocking the salt that they cannot cross, so a ghost can't cross. So that's like one. You got the cross and the vampires. I don't care about that one.
yeah.
Um, but there was assault. There was burning the bones of the person that the ghost was from to help them cross over, or
Oh,
so that they couldn't do harm. So there's all these little things that I was like, that what comes into mind when I start
I mean,
talking about it.
salt is a good thing for protection anyway, regardless of I mean, it's just a good protection thing. So a lot of times, you might put salt. I've been, like on the windowsills and stuff. So, and what was the other one? I don't know anything about burning bones. It's like
Right, right,
the
right.
one time I've helped cross my brother-in-law over and somebody was helping me do that. It's like you're just talking to them.
Okay.
And I've watched my English friend that, but it's basically you're just talking to the spirit. You don't we didn't special with anything. So
So, so,
anything.
do you, on the spirits that you do talk to, you don't feel like they're not crossing over because they've got some unfinished business? There's another Hollywood rhetoric.
Well, like on the Hornet, for example, some of them served on that ship, so they want to hang out there. And some of them just really like, I guess, the vibe there. There were other spirits, so I don't know why, and I don't even I'm not an expert on this. So it's like they may have crossed over, but it's like maybe their spirit just wants to come and visit every now and then. When I talk through the channeling medium, those people are all in the spirit world. I'm, talking to them and we're just having a conversation. It's not like anyway, but it's
Yeah.
not like haven't crossed over. But you can still talk to them from wherever
Uh,
they are. So,
okay, so there's a piece of Hollywood rhetoric that I would say is kind of what you're talking about. Is they use There's two programs that I remember using. They called it the veil.
uh-huh.
Whereas just you're saying is like there's just this veil that keeps us from seeing the spirit world all the time. And
I would think so. Yeah.
and the spirits can cross through the veil at certain points in time, and they can cross back at certain points in time in certain places. Again, Hollywood rhetoric. I was
Right.
just and I
Yeah.
totally This is totally tangential because I was just super curious, because I've never met anybody that could actually speak and see in the spirit world. I've never discounted it for this reason
Yeah,
in
it's
my
not like I can't see into the spirit world. I'm just talking to people who are in the spirit world and we have great conversations and they describe what it is. But I mean it's just again, it's not like yeah, it's totally different than what I hear in the Christian world. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And
And
like, yeah,
it's a place of love, and it's not all humans, but and it's a love.
so I've always believed in, and I know this is not about me, and this never is going to be about me, but yeah, my whole belief system was that it's kind of goes into science, right? We know that the body is made up of a ton of electricity and energy. And we also know through science that energy cannot be destroyed, but it can be
Correct.
changed.
Right.
So I believe that when our body's time is over, it doesn't mean that that energy has stopped. It's got to change in some form. And I always thought that that's what, um, that Christians, Jews, we feel like that is the soul. That soul is energy, right?
Right.
And maybe what you're seeing spiritually is are those souls,
Right.
and that soul is energy.
Yes.
So, however it manifests itself is a point of contention, a point of belief.
Right. Right.
So
And
yeah.
the beauty is I've learned a lot from some great masterful teachers. I've also learned like I've talked to my parents and it's like my mom has learned so much after death. It's like, they don't stop learning.
Hmm.
You have another base. I mean, it's like you don't stop. You don't, okay, now I'm gonna sit and do nothing. I mean, unless you want to. But I mean, I've had conversations with her and she's talking to me about quantum stuff, and it's like, whoa, that was not my mom when she was alive. Unless she just always played dumb and or not very or intellectual, but she was great wisdom and great knowledge about quantum physics and stuff. It's like, well, this is cool. Let's talk more. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
my parents have totally changed since they've died.
wow. Okay, that is interesting.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now I'm okay. So my parents are aging,
uh-huh.
and I love them very much, and I hope they live forever. But I'm going to come see you when the time must be come because I'd like to know what they're going to be doing. Um, so my very last question
Okay,
is: let's go back to the crone, and
okay,
if you can explain that to me and
sure,
and the audience, and we'll wrap up.
okay. The crone is a wise woman. So it doesn't you don't have to be old, but, I'm almost 70, so I like it. I just call myself the wise woman crone because I've learned so much through all these experiences. So and you don't have to be a witch to you can all learn. Um, but I've embraced a magical practice, so, spells, intentions, and just honoring nature. It's like I get so much out of taking a walk and being near the trees here. And I live near some foresty parks, and I just love being here in the nature. And um, it all my soul, and I get a lot of inspiration that way. So again, it's just a matter of and then tuning into your wisdom and tuning into your intuition, because when I listen and I do it, then it's like there's nothing I can't do. And I've gotten a lot of, good inspiration. I mean, when I'm out, I walk, I'll often get if especially if I'm prepared to talk, it's like, "Oh, yeah, this is what you should say." It's like, "Oh, yeah, good." And I or working on my book, "Oh, yeah, this is what you should how you should." Okay, okay, thank you. So, intuition comes and the guidance, and I believe I'm guided from many sources, and, I've got some powerful friends on the other side. Yeah,
That is so interesting, and I think we might just have to, give this a once and meet back up and just and
that'd
kind
be
of
great.
delve into even more of the magic side of
Yeah,
it.
that'd be
But I definitely need to read your book, and I'm working on another book, and we'll talk about that as we wrap up. But I just want to wrap up, and every time have been ending this with just a series of the takeaways basically
okay.
from it.
Sure.
So through everything you've been and through all these experiences, good, bad, husbands, and then learning about the paranormal, basically the biggest part that I've come to find that you've talked about is having that support system. It
Right.
sounds like with a support system, you could pretty much get through anything.
Yes, and I've also learned that it's not selfish to take care of yourself, and you can put yourself first without being selfish. Because if you're not your best self and if you're not happy with yourself, then you're not going to be any good to anybody else. So I now take way better care of myself. I stand up for myself. It's probably why I'm not getting a lot of dates because I'm very transparent. I'm a Leo, so it's like like I tell you like it is. But so I'm finding my that area, but it's like taking care of yourself and standing up for yourself. And the other thing is know that you can change no matter how old you are. You can change your life if you need a better path. It's get the help you need. You don't have to do it on your own, because part of my on new work with like the new book that's coming out is to like offer some peer support for people who are struggling, because it's like maybe you can't leave that relationship, but if you can and or if you should and you can, go ahead. Don't feel guilty. If it's about you and your kids or even just you, it's like it's okay to leave. And
Excellent.
yeah,
Yeah, I think in order to be happy, on this side of the veil, it's a short life, and we need to make sure that, that whatever we do is better, and we need
right.
to be as happy as we possibly can. And then you said therapy is good,
Therapy is
you know,
great.
don't don't blame the stigma, but we also talked about that when finding a therapist, it is okay for you to walk away if you do not
Right.
feel
Yeah,
that
you
there
need
is
to
a
find
chemistry.
one. Yeah, you do need to find one. I luckily found one. My number 7, Mark, he's a narcissist. I didn't know that until we'd already been together 20 years. I didn't know that until I realized, that's a whole another story, but it's like, oh, things aren't working for me. Oh, now it's COVID. And it's like I just finally hit a point where I needed to stand up for myself, and speaking up to a narcissist doesn't work well.
uh,
So, it took us several years to untangle. There's still some dramas going on, but book number 2 is all about navigating through narcissistic abuse.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'd definitely be looking forward to that one. And the last thing that was
Yes.
actually one of the you had mentioned way in the beginning of this episode was communicate, communicate, communicate,
Yes.
and know someone before you make that big plunge.
Yeah, and everybody's communication style might be a little bit different. So figure that out. And if you need a therapist to help you figure it out, but also, if they're not willing, and I say this on my dating profiles, I need to find somebody who's willing to talk about the hard stuff because Mark wasn't. We'd
Right.
skirt around the issues and I'd get these vague answers. And then I'd get all the gaslighting and the bullying. And it was all my fault. Yeah.
So
And that's where all my one-liners come in. So
yeah. So you might do you might have to do a bathroom book and all in one-liners. That
good point.
yeah, you
Yeah,
never know. You never
I've
know,
got
right?
it. I've got the list started. It's in the intro for the book, but yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, Joanne, thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
have got your socials,
Great.
um, and we can talk about any other contact information that if anybody has any questions that they can
Good.
reach
Yeah,
you.
because I have a new website that's about to be live, but you can email Joanne at joannefawcett.com. Sign you up for my email list. I've got some helpful flyers about narcissistic abuse and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's life beyond
Excellent.
bookkeeping.
Yes, yes. Again, thank you so much. This has been
Oh, thank
an
you.
amazing episode, especially for for this. It's a brand new podcast that seems to be it's taken off. Even though today
Good.
was the first day it was launched. Oh well, in this time hearing this because this will probably launch on Wednesday, next Wednesday,
Okay.
on the 13th. So yes, thank you so much. This has been incredible. I love this conversation,
Well,
and I
wonderful.
really
I've
appreciate
enjoyed
it.
it. Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah.